What's in a story? What is in a story? Well, if you don't believe in manifestation, then story probably doesn't mean much to you at all. However, if you know that thoughts become things, then you know that story is the portal that manifests your future. We are a people of the book. We are a people of stories. So remember the following line and remember it forever. That is, the stories you tell yourself about yourself become your reality. I'll say that again. The stories you tell yourself about yourself become your reality. But I'm jumping ahead of myself. Let's go back to the beginning. 1987, New York City, Columbia Presbyterian Hospital. I was born. When I was born, I saw the world through the lens of everything is possible. Nothing was impossible. Nothing was a limitation. If I wanted to create a tea party with friends, all I had to do was use my imagination, and I had rabbits and raccoons and bears and birds all sitting at my tea party. In fact, what is the most popular costume that little girls wear on Purim or Halloween? A princess. And what are the costumes that little boys wear? Superheroes. Why is it that little girls dress up as princesses? It's not enough to say that they want to be a princess or little boys want to be superheroes. No. The moment a girl puts on that gown, the moment a boy puts on that outfit, they embody princesses and superheroes. In their mind, there is nothing and nobody that could tell them otherwise. That is who they are. In fact, what is the tool that human beings use to create meaning? It's speech. Speech is the tool that we have been gifted to create meaning in our lives. How powerful is speech? Well, let's think about it. I'm sure you've heard the words abracadabra, but perhaps you don't know that abracadabra comes from the language of Aramaic, which is Old Hebrew, and it translates to, it gets created as I speak. Abracadabra. It gets created as I speak. And we see abracadabra in the book of Bereshit, the book of Genesis, where God, Hashem, creates the world through 10 utterances, through speech. And if God can create through speech, and we are made in Tselem Elohim, we are made in the image of God, we have a God particle inside of us, it goes without saying that we have the power to co-create. We are mini creators. And using our thoughts, using the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, using our speech, we manifest our future. And technically speaking, we can manifest infinite Ein Sof possibilities for ourselves. We think about a certain amount of money, we can have it. We think about a life partner, we can attract it. Nothing is a limitation. But then what happens? What happens to our speech? I'll go in and tell a personal story. When I was 8 years old, I had my first crush on a boy named Tommy. And I would see Tommy in the hallways and he would look at me. And in my head, I'd think, oh, well, he's looking at me. He must like me. And then one day during recess, I saw Tommy approach me from the corner of my eye. And I was convinced he was going to tap me on my shoulder and look at me and say, Ayelet, I like you too. So what did he do? He did. He came up to me. He did tap me on the shoulder. He did look me in the eyes. And what he said was, Ayelet, I don't like you. Not even a little bit. Get that through your thick head. And of course, in all of my Sephardi sass in that moment, the part of me that didn't want to admit that I was being rejected looked at him and said, well, that's okay because I don't like you either. But really what happened? What happened in that moment? Besides the fact that I grabbed my best friend and dragged her to the bathroom and I cried and I cried and I cried. And what do you think the story that I told myself about myself became in that moment? I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable. No boy will ever love me. I'm not pretty. The list goes on. And because I did not know at age 8 what to do with that new story, little by little, that story became my identity. So much so that as I got older, I found myself as a teenager putting up walls, not allowing people to get too close because God forbid they would see the part of me that is so vulnerable and so hurt. God forbid they would see that part of me and hurt that part again. I was not willing to risk being hurt like that ever again. So I created a new part inside of myself, and that part was called tough girl. I became the tough girl, and nobody was going to tell the tough girl that she's not lovable, that she's not worthy. But she was tough. And when does tough ever let love in? Never. So it didn't matter how many guys told me they loved me and tried to prove to me they loved me and showered me with compliments and gifts and affection. Did not matter because my story became my reality. I'll give you another example of a story that I grew up with. So in my early teenage years, I had a little bit of a shopping addiction. I guess every teenage girl does. And I used to take my mom's credit card, take my parents' credit card, and go on these insane shopping sprees. And one day my mom approaches me with a bank statement from that month. And she says, Ayele, do you see how much money you just spent this month? She goes, what do I look like to you? A bank account? Do I look like an ATM? She said, money does not grow on trees. And then for years, she continued to tell me, Ayelet, money does not grow on trees. And it took me into my adult years when I started to learn and teach the spiritual science of manifesting that I realized I had a blockage. I had a story I was telling myself around attracting financial abundance. And that story was, money does not grow on trees. And I had to rewrite my story in order to open the tzinor, the portal that would then allow shefa, abundance, to come in. And so the new story I tell myself is, well, money comes from paper. Paper comes from trees. Therefore, money does in fact grow on trees. And now I'm able to see money from a different perspective with a new story. So let's fast forward to age 25. I found myself in Kumbh Mela, which is the largest festival of consciousness on the planet. It takes place in India, and I had already spent 6 years in India at that point, almost 6 years at that point. So Kumbh Mela, it's me and 50 million, that's 50 million Hindus in the middle of the desert, all seeking and searching for enlightenment. And while at Kumbh Mela one day, my then teacher / guru told us all that we have a 30-minute break. We could do whatever we want. Now, mind you, let me give you some context. Kumbh Mela takes place in the middle of the desert. So it is just barren land for miles and 50 million people, remember. So the entire festival is just tent after tent after tent of guru and his students. And so my tent had 10,000 people in it. So just visualize, imagine the magnitude, the size of this tent. Okay. And it had 2 little doors. So just painting the picture, have the visual in mind. So the guru says you have a 30-minute break to do whatever you want. So I decided to curl up on my backpack, use my backpack as a pillow, and I drifted into a deep, blissful sleep. And while in the middle of my sleep, I begin to hear this really loud banging noise. And I thought I was just dreaming. So I opened one eye. I said, you must be dreaming. You must be asleep. Close your eye. Okay, I closed my eyes again, drifted back off into a deep sleep. And then suddenly the noise started to get louder and louder to the point where it had a vibration. I could feel the banging noises in my body. So I opened my eyes and I realized that the tent itself was starting to move like it had its own heartbeat. It began to pulse in and out, this massive structure with 10,000 of us inside it. And suddenly, the walls of the tent began to rip, and winds and water began flooding in. Water started to rise, the ground became mud, and we all realized that we were in the middle of a very real tornado. So in a moment of pure chaos, 10,000 people all stood up and at the exact same time ran towards those 2 tiny doors. Imagine the traffic jam. I said to myself, this structure is about to collapse any second. If I don't find a plan B, this thing is going to collapse on me and I am done for. Suddenly, I spotted in the corner of my eye a little dip under the foundation of the tent. So I decided to take my chances. I slid under the foundation of the tent, found myself outside the tent covered in mud from head to toe, debris flying everywhere, metal poles flying everywhere, people running for shelter, but there was no shelter. We were in the middle of the desert. There was no stable structure, just tents. Until I spotted a huge transportation truck that came in that morning to bring fruit to our camp. And I said, this is my only chance at survival. It is the most solid structure here. So I slid under the truck and I had my eyes closed and I was begging God to let me live, begging God to let me live. And suddenly I heard a voice from my right side. So I open my eyes and I look over and I see this elderly woman with piercing blue eyes. Her eyes pierced my soul. And she said, darling, don't you worry. If we die here, we die with the grace of our guru. And I just remember thinking, absolutely not. I am not ready to die, not with a guru, not with anybody. I have parents who love me. I have siblings. I have a future. My olam haba, my world to come is not sitting with a guru. So I close my eyes again. And this time I am in a deep, deep state of prayer, of intention. And I set the intention. I pray out loud. I said, dear God, if you can hear me, I need a miracle. And without understanding why, I cover my eyes and I recited the words, Shema Israel Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And by the time I lifted my hand from my eyes, everything got silent. The tornado had ended. And I knew in that moment that miracles are possible. I knew in that moment that when you ask God from a place of real desire, of real intentionality, of real kavana, intention, He responds. So fast forward a few months, and the guru had invited 20 of us on a bus tour of southern India. We were going to live on a bus. It was not going to be anything luxurious. So we had a week before the bus was going to depart from the ashram. So I decided to spend that week in Bombay with some friends who have a pool and a nice little setup. And I'm sitting by the pool in meditation. And I'm doing my visualization work. I'm focusing on my breath, but this voice keeps wanting to come in and I keep pushing it away. And the voice just keeps getting louder. It wants to come in and interrupt my meditation. And I keep pushing it away until finally I said, okay, there's no meditating here. This voice is so loud. Clearly something bigger than me wants to tell me something. So I asked the voice, I said, what is it you're trying to tell me? And this loud, clear voice in my head said, leave this country now and go to Israel. Within 30 minutes, I had my flight booked. The next day, I landed in Israel without a plan, without a place to sleep, without knowing why I was being divinely guided to a place that I had no previous intention of being. But I also knew, because after 6 years of living in India and working on quieting the monkey mind, I was able to listen to that voice of intuition, that voice of divine guidance, that still small voice that if we get really quiet in our minds, we can hear God speaking directly to us. And I realized I was being divinely guided. And I also knew that when you change your story, you change your life. I don't know why God put me in that tornado, but I knew that if I changed my story about what the world meant, about what I could become, about who I'm meant to be, and I surrender to the voices in my head, to the self-doubt, to the I'm not enough that got created when Tommy told me he didn't like me. If I surrender to those voices and I let them go and I recreate my story anew, God creates miracles. And this act of changing our story is the mechanism that reprograms who we are. And as we find ourselves at the peak of 49 days of counting the Omer for Sfirat Omer, and we're about to receive the Torah, there is something that we need to realize. And that is that counting the Sfirot allows you to reprogram on a bio-memory level. You do this by remembering differently from the first initial memory. I'll say that again. You reprogram on a bio-memory level by remembering differently the first initial memory. You go in and encode your psyche with what it is that you want to experience moving forward, what it is you want to rewrite your story as. Your mind tells your body, and therefore you reprogram each cell. What holds these cells together is energy in the form of sfirot. It is God's way of working through us to recreate us anew, to recreate us so that we can move forward in receiving the Torah through the lens of Ein Sof, infinite possibility. But in order to receive the Torah, you must receive all of your parts. The part of me that felt not good enough, the part of me that didn't feel beautiful, the part of me that was scared and saw the world as an unsafe place because, heck, I almost died in a tornado. The part of me that when I don't receive the type of validation from my mom or my dad feels unworthy or unloved or rejected. All of those parts, they're so real and so alive in all of us. We come into this world and we see the world as a playground of possibility. Anything is possible. But then what happens? We learn how to speak. And the speech becomes stories, and stories become our identity. When we let go of our old stories and we realize that our mind, our brain, neuroplasticity is Play-Doh, it's not a rock. We realize we have the power to delve into the realm of our subconscious, erase the stories we've been told, give them back to where they came from. They were not ours to begin with. And from that blank slate, we can rewrite. So, fast forward to 8 months after arriving in Israel, I was sitting at lunch with a number of my girlfriends, and I declared out into God's universe. I said, "Dear God, my intention is to be married by May of this year, if it is your will, or something better. My intention is to be married by May of this year, if it is your will, or something better." Later that month, I met my husband, and we were married by May of that year, May 29th to be exact. I changed my story to one of not being lovable, of not being worthy, to one of anything is possible and I am worthy. And I started to live my life from that empowered place. When you change your story, you change your life. Create a vessel that is able to receive by surrendering. Poteach et yadecha umaspia lekol chai ratzon. You open your hands and He gives you according to what it is that you desire. But if our hands are closed and we're holding on to our old story so tightly for dear life, there's no place for God to enter. Change your story, change your life. Chag Sameach and happy manifesting. Sting.